Hello everybody and welcome back to the Fortress of Solitude. Today we're talking about Green Lantern Galactic Slam Issue 1, written by Jeremy Adams with art by Cian Tormey and Pat Booten, colours by Romulo Fajardo Jr. and letters by Buddy Bowden. The Omega tournament isn't just having an effect on Earth, but the entire galaxy, and with many heroes off fighting in the tournament, it's up to Kyle Rayner, Odyssey, Superboy and the Silver Scarab to fight off the horde of parademons that have sprung up in the wake of Darkseid's imminent return. So I'm a bit behind on Green Lantern right now, but do expect some videos on that very soon. But I like this team Kyle put together. That was in some of the stuff that I last read, and it's a great dynamic for a team. I love every character in the team. It's all such an interesting makeup of a team, and I like that now part of a DCKO event, even if it is just a tie-in. As Kyle's team is overcome by the onslaught of parademons, Kyle decides to deploy his hidden weapon, slamming his fists together to become the White Lantern, unleashing every last bit of color spectrum power he has on the army of parademons, obliterating them fully. Doing this means that Kyle is out of juice until he recharges his ring, but before he can get to safety, he is tackled through a boom tube by a parademon, but instead of a horrible bloody death in an apocalyptic fire pit, Kyle finds himself on Vanaheim 12, a theme park world where Galactic wrestler Noxious Red makes his move against Omega Bam Mam for the Wham Belt Championship. So if it hasn't been obvious throughout the entire DCKO event, the entire event is basically just a big wrestling match, and this tie-in is just really reiterating that. It's hugely influenced by wrestling, from tag team matches, fighters cutting promos, to even the Heart of Apocalypse being some sort of spoiled fan who gets mad when someone wins he doesn't want to win. And now this is an actual wrestling match being the center stage for the Green Lantern's involvement in the event. It's fantastic, it's over the top, and just the right amount of crazy. Kyle can barely take anything in before Omega Bam Man suplexes Noxious Red onto the parademon who took Kyle, killing it instantly. Omega Bam Man is tossed into Kyle, but the hero is unhurt, only wondering how he's somehow maybe hallucinating all of this. So for those unfamiliar with Omega Bam Man, Jeremy Adams actually brought him into the fold in his Flash one, when Flash got involved in Wham and the intergalactic wrestling matches that Omega Bam Man is part of, and ended up being his tag team partner for a little bit. I'm glad that Adams has decided to bring the character back in an interesting way, and also getting him involved in a big event. That's really cool. Now, usually if they have like these one and done characters who, maybe fans like and everything, they'll bring back in a story a little later on, but I like that they're making Omega Bam Man a big part of this DCKO tie-in, like making him second lead to Kyle Rayner. Noxious Red comes for Omega Bam Man again, calling him an old man, but Omega thinks that he's still in his prime, locking arms with the fellow wrestler as Red tells him that the drive will just keep giving Omega match after match, so he might as well just surrender since eventually he will fail. Omega doesn't think he will, as no one, especially Noxious Red, is going to take the title from him. He hits Red with the Fan Lee throw, smashing him right into the giant war wheel nearby, a giant Ferris wheel with Darkseid's face on it, causing it to topple over, showering its nth metal frame onto Noxious Red and Omega Bam Man and many other people. The crowds and announcers believe that this could be the end for the champ, but Omega Bam Man rises from the debris, revealing Noxious Red is down for the count, meaning Omega Bam Man is still the reigning champ and has held his title for the 252nd time. See, I just love the simplicity of this. It's just a wrestling match turned up to 11, thanks to superpowered people being involved in it, and we have Kyle, who has been kind of effectively isekai'd into this world. He's got no powers, he doesn't have a ring that works at the moment, so he's just a guy, and he has to figure out what the hell is going on. Kyle wants to help out the people who might be injured by the debris and by the supposed impending nuclear meltdown of Noxious Red, but Omega Bam Man knows that they need to leave because of that. Kyle becomes angry since they have to help, or at least alert the United Planets or Green Lantern Corps, but before he can finish his speech, Omega Bam Man grabs him and they are both teleported away to a place called the Hub, a sprawling facility filled with fighters and wrestlers from all over the universe, and the place Omega Bam Man calls home. Okay, so the wrestlers having what is basically their own Justice League watchtower is so fucking cool. That's the type of crazy stuff I like, and stuff we get to explore with Omega Bearman. The hub was actually hinted at when Adams brought him into that Flash run, but we never really got to see much of it. So I like that we're getting a little bit more. We're getting to experience a little bit more of Omega Bearman's life, and the hub and like what it does and what it means. On board, Omega meets with a mantis-like alien named Sliverly, who reveals the intergalactic views are still down, which Omega attributes to them still being cut off from the multiverse, something the Mantis cannot seem to sort out. Kyle still thinks this is some weird dream, but quickly realizes how real it is when the Mantis reveals that Kyle will have to fight alongside Omega Bearman in the next match, something the wrestler is well aware of, and something it looks like he might have been keeping from Kyle for some reason. So we got a little bit of intrigue there going on with Omega, which I like because he isn't really all that complex of a character. He's, a big lughead who likes wrestling. But if Adams is going to explore him a little bit more through this tie-in, I am all for it. Omega soon meets his arch nemesis, Mr. Scuzz, who thinks that he should enjoy his victory while he can, since the drive is going to pit them against each other sooner or later, and he will take Omega's championship belt like he did when he took it off of Omega's mentor, Bromega. Scuzz leaves Omega as the Mantis alien reminds him to be careful of Scuzz, since he's trying to make an alliance to finish Omega off once and for all, both in and out of the ring. Kyle finally gets a moment to talk and tell Omega that he needs to get home since the fate of the universe is in trouble, wanting to know where the nearest Green Lantern is. Omega is quick to grab Kyle and shut him up, saying that the word Green Lantern isn't safe to say on board the hub, and Kyle would do well to hide his ring as well, since the Lanterns have been trying to shut them down since they started their matches back in the 36th century. Omega does notice something is up with Kyle's ring though, since it hasn't activated in any time, and Kyle knows he needs to just let it charge, wanting to know where they are in the galaxy. Omega, while posing and flexing his muscles, probably to, assert dominance or something, tells Kyle that he won't be able to do anything while the hub is in transit, and he'll explain everything over dinner. So I said before how this was a little Isekai coded, Kyle being dropped into an unknown world, no powers, he's just a regular guy, but it's also sort of the reverse of an Isekai, where in an Isekai there's always that sort of all-powerful kind of fantasy power fulfillment stuff going on, and here there's none of that because Kyle is literally dropped into a world with no power and no idea of what's going on. He's just a regular man and he has to figure out what's going on. It's a perfect fit for a underdog wrestling story, especially with someone like Kyle. Later on, over some rather disgusting food, Omega tells him how he can't get Kyle back home thanks to the algorithmic drive which pushes the hub through space and time, and he's unable to leave while they're in transit since he doesn't even know when they're going to be fighting their next match. It could be 1,000 years in the future or 1,000,000 years in the past. See, the idea of the hub and just the WAM in general, the wrestling across the multiverse corporation, that's like a great groundwork for like a comic, like for like an ongoing or like a mini series of like different matches, and I'm surprised nothing has actually been done with it. Like, I'm sure that would sell super well because DCKO is selling very well and people are starting to finally pick up on all of the wrestling stuff that's going on in it, which people seem to really like. So why not do a book that's totally devoted to that, because that could work really well, fighting across the multiverse, different characters make an appearance every now and then for like special matches. You got the tag team matches, you got Omega Bearman as the central character fighting his way up the ladder or something. It's like the perfect premise for a book, and I'm so surprised it has not been done yet. Omega thinks that Kyle will get used to staying on the hub like he did, and we actually finally get the origin of Omega Bearman, who was a child named Bam who watched the wrestler Bromega dominate the ring during the Royal Krypton Crumble, and eventually he became so obsessed with him that he began to train just like Bromega, using his family's farm as his gym, lifting pails of milk and doing push-ups with rocks on his back. He soon became stronger and stronger, but doing so made him an outcast from his people, who, while they all had natural super strength, they saw his swole physique and his strength as some sort of toxic personality, something they did not want to be part of their community. Soon Bam gets a chance to prove himself when a Trino, a three-headed bull-like creature, rampages through a town, and he stops it with one punch to the Trino's face. However, despite saving the town, Bam violated the law and used his species' immense strength in an aggressive manner, so he was exiled from the village. Forced to leave, Bam headed to Galactic City, but even there he found out he stood out, and it felt like his entire planet hated him. However, one day, the Wrestling Across the Multiverse Corporation arrived on Galaxia. So I'm quite loving the origin of Omega Bam. I didn't think we'd actually end up getting something like this, but this feels like, the back door to, what I was saying before about the wrestling book. This feels like it's a cool lead into that. It's also making Omega Bam a much more well-rounded character, like it's actually giving him some depth. He's not just going to be like a big roided out kind of macho man Randy Savage, Hulk Hogan type wrestler persona. He's got a little bit more to him. Bam finds his way into the wrestling match and finds it's Bromega battling Chancellor Dynamite, and after a hard-fought match, Bromega wins. Before Bromega leaves, Bam finds him and begs him on hand and knee if he'll teach him how to be a wrestler for Wham. Bromega warns him that he'll have to fight, and Bam is more than happy to accompany him, so Bromega takes him up to the hub and dubs him Bam Man, teaching the boy the ropes, literally and figuratively, before forming a tag team with him, wrestling across the universe from planet to planet. Actually, Bromega and Bam Man participated in a match that led to Bromega's death at the hands of Mr. Scuzz, who beat him to death and took his belt. Before he dies though, Bromega gives Bam his signature glasses, telling him to keep training hard. Bam undergoes his own Rocky montage, working out while also taking down every opponent put in front of him until he would eventually get his wish and have a rematch against Mr. Scuzz, so he could take back the belt. And eventually that fight came, and amongst all of the showboating and back and forth hits, Omega Bam Man won against Scuzz, taking back the belt of his mentor. So one part of Adam's writing here I took note of, especially earlier on in the origin, is he keeps bringing back Bam's race-hated toxic personalities and how he is using strength. He's using his natural strength and they view that as toxic, and I think there's like something there, like he has to tap into that toxicity to win against Scuzz here, and like that feels like something that you could play with in an ongoing, maybe, maybe he feels that, like, he let down his people because he tapped into this toxicity and he's trying to, like, not make it toxic, or, like, trying to show people, their strength is not a burden or something, and they can use it for good and use it to help people. There's groundwork there, and it, just if it just had an ongoing, or just, a 6-issue mini or something, you could do something with that there. So while I am enjoying Bam's origin story here, I will say it's a little long-winded. This origin alone is just 10 pages, which is almost a full comic unto itself, but it's something that could have been done in half the time, I feel. On top of that, Adams is using an overabundance of speech bubbles to kind of over-explain everything that's going on. Like, we don't really need to know all the little details, just kind of fill us in on what's going on and we can kind of pick up what's happening in between the lines. And it's just covering all this wonderful artwork by Sian Tormey as well. I get it's a special issue, so it can be oversized, be a couple more pages longer, but things could have been tightened up a little bit more, I think. Bam finishes his story and Kyle doesn't get how this relates to him getting back to Earth, and Omega knows that it doesn't, so he should just join Wham like he did and fight with him, or he can try and convince the Drive to send him back in time, which the Drive will only do if Kyle's people are facing an apocalyptic event. Kyle wants to go with that option since they definitely are on Earth, and he is indeed facing the end of everything. After a little convincing, Omega takes Kyle to the Drive's secured containment, and Kyle, now dressed in full masked wrestler regalia so he can hide who he is, arrives, finding this is a little bit humiliating, although he doesn't mind the cape, something he has always wanted, despite Batman always warning him against it. The duo manage to get through the Drive's security systems thanks to Kyle's half-charged ring, allowing them to meet the Drive, who is this big blue Wizard of Oz type guy who also kind of looks a little bit like Dr. Manhattan. The Drive introduces itself as Daryl, knowing the wrestlers aren't meant to be there, and again, as I said before, the book's starting to get filled with speech bubbles, so much so that there's a panel here that it looks like Daryl is kind of like leaning around the speech bubble to talk to them, so it makes me think, like, was all of this intentional? Like, like wrestlers like to talk, cut promos and stuff, like, is that intentional in this? If that's the case, that didn't come off as intentional, it just came off as someone who hasn't been been editing themselves a little bit in the writing process. Daryl unfortunately can't help Kyle get home since he's actually not the drive itself. He's just the AI being used to manipulate the drive and set all of the matches up and tell the drive where to go. It refuses to help the heroes since it's been told specifically by its boss to avoid Earth until the Dark Lord has returned. The Dark Lord being Darkseid, of course. So now it's all sort of coming back around into DCKO territory. I didn't think the book would actually do that. I thought it was just going to be kind of self-contained and like take Kyle out of the story for a little bit and then bring him back with, I don't know, reinforcements in the third act back to Earth or something. And I mean, that does look like where it's going, but I like that there's actually a little bit more to the story. Like there's actually some intrigue here. Like why was they kept away from Earth? Like what does Darkseid have planned for Wham? Very intriguing stuff. Kyle asks who installed Daryl, and we get a big shocking twist as it's revealed that Bromega is alive and well and has turned heel, becoming a villain alongside Mr. Scuzz. Omega Bam Man is shocked his mentor is still alive, learning that he can hold his breath for a very long time and he did it all in the service of Darkseid. Bromega tells his apprentice and Kyle that he knows what Darkseid has planned as a child of Apocalypse, and he came back into the fold thanks to Desard choosing him, Mr. Scuzz, and Knockout to join their reign of chaos. Kyle figures that Bromega is the reason they can't get a distress signal to Earth or the Lanterns, and he is indeed the reason, using Daryl to control the drive to send them to places that he could destroy while everyone was watching the Wham matches, seeding chaos and destruction all through the chaos for Darkseid. After yet another long page of monologues, Bromega decides to deal with Kyle and Bam once and for all, attacking them before they can get the jump on him. Kyle wants to take out Daryl first since they can then get the message out to the Lanterns and to Earth, so the tag team split up, with Kyle going to deal with the AI, while Omega Bam Man deals with Scuzz, Bromega, and Knockout. The Royal Rumble begins, and as Omega Bam Man takes on three of Wham's biggest and best wrestlers, Kyle finally makes it to Daryl, using his ring to make a bat construct and smash the blue orb across the room, destroying it. With Daryl out of the picture, the drive is able to take the hub back to Earth, and as Ran, the Vega System, and Tamaran try and get in contact with Earth, they find Wham has appeared above the planet and is broadcasting live from the sealed off world. So this is kind of just a little bit of a nitpick, but Queen Blackfire is shown here as not knowing what's happening on Earth, that despite in the Titans book, she is actually aiding Starfire and the Titans in their evacuation of Earth. She turned up to help them against the parademons and save them and give them safe harbor. You could argue that this is set before that sort of stuff is happening, but we see Earth in this book and it's already been turned into New Apocalypse, which when she turned up in Titans had not happened yet, so it's a little bit of a timeline snafu. I get it, these writers are balancing a lot, that thing happens, but it's just something that kind of stood out to me. The Wham presenters announce their big new fight on Earth, excited that the drive brought them there to the big universal catastrophe on Earth. It makes sense now since, you know, they're sowing chaos elsewhere in the galaxy, keeping everyone distracted from Earth, but I also feel like there might have been a thing where it's like, oh, if Wham turned up here, started doing all their like fancy wrestling matches, it would kind of take the spotlight away from the Heart of Apocalypse, which, as we've seen through DCKO and the All Fight Month books, is insanely jealous when it comes to certain things, especially like things not going its way and how it's ordered things, much like a petulant fanboy. So I can see it maybe not wanting Wham to be involved in there because it would take the spotlight away from there. I could absolutely see that being why the Heart of Apocalypse doesn't want them anywhere near Earth. Down on Earth, Omega Bam Man and Kyle, now dubbed the Meano Greeno, arrive with smoke and music, just like your classic wrestling ring entry, and they are set to fight against Bromega, Scuzz, and Knockout. Bromega isn't too concerned with being on Earth, since now he wants everyone to see Darkseid's triumph over the heroes and the universe. Omega Bam Man doesn't really care for his mentor's antics and tosses the body of a dead parademon at Bromega, knocking him down, as Kyle finally ditches his wrestling garb for his Green Lantern uniform, his ring now powered up just a little bit more that he can use it. Omega Bam Man gets to work, easily taking out Scuzz, who seemed like he had a real glass jaw since he was taken down with one single hit, which goes against the kind of talk we got of him earlier on in the book where he was like this big threat and everything. And I guess that's kind of like the point, like he's the big glass jaw kind of corpo speak wrestler, you know, he doesn't really wrestle, he's just there for the promos to cut the promos. Kyle, meanwhile, deals with Knockout, making her live up to her name and knocking her out with a chair to the back of the head. Omega Bam Man, meanwhile, confronts his mentor, pile driving him into the ground before diving off a non-existent top rope, delivering his cosmic elbow, which decimates the area with a huge nuclear-like explosion. So at this point, the book is already way too long, but I can't help but like all of this wrestling stuff. This is all really fun stuff. It's great seeing all of these over-the-top wrestling moves, power bombs that create nuclear explosions, and then just like wrestlers who can just kind of shrug it off and just keep moving. It's really fun. Again, how is this not a book? Again, how is there no DC book dedicated to all of the cosmic wrestlers it has? And how is Jeremy Adams not writing that? Bromega is finally defeated, and while he nurses his sore head, he knows the Darkseid will win and everyone is toast. Fortunately, Bromega is probably wrong, as thanks to Wham's broadcast, the Lanterns, Rainian, Tamaran, and Omega Men arrive to aid Earth. Again, Blackfire is mentioned to only now be arriving on Earth. Yeah, no, whatever. The various factions move in to help, and Bromega has one final revelation for Omega Bam Man, revealing that the wrestler and Kyle played themselves, since Omega fought with a Green Lantern, which is illegal by Wham standards, so he forfeits the match, meaning he no longer is champion of Wham, and not only that, because he knowingly teamed with the Green Lantern, he has been kicked out of the Wrestling Corporation. Wham quickly teleports away to its next big match some other place in some other time, and Bam takes it all in his stride, left behind by them, but he knows he's been at the bottom before, and it looks like Earth could use his help. Kyle is happy to help with his new friend, as the Lanterns begin their assault on the Parademon hordes, and Omega Bam Man and Kyle Rayner leap into action as well. Green Lantern Galactic Slam issue 1 was a really fun wrestling-orientated book. It is set in an event that is already inspired so much by wrestling. I loved everything about this book. Like it just sets everything up so well, and it's just all stuff that I'm like, why is this not a book anymore? Like, why is this not like constantly being released as like an ongoing book in some way, shape, or form? It's all very fun, it's lighthearted, it's action heavy, it's all stuff that I know people would enjoy quite a fair bit. That being said, I do think the book went on for a little bit long. I do know it's a special, but it was devoting so many pages to stuff that could have been done in, 1 or 2 pages, maybe even less. Same with all of the speech bubbles just like covering Sian Tormey's beautiful artwork. It's just a real shame that like there didn't seem to be any sort of oversight when it came to checking editing or something. I'm not sure how any of this sort of works, but it felt like Adams wrote a bit too much and then wasn't edited enough. So that's a real shame that it kind of like got a little bit long-winded there, especially in the 3rd act, but I did enjoy everything about it. It was a nice little reprieve from the rather serious high-stakes stuff of the DCKO main event. I like that we could just like catch up with some wrestlers and have a couple of fun matches with Kyle Rayner. I'm intrigued to see what this also means for DCKO, because now we have all these different factions now descending upon Earth to try and help them out. So I'm intrigued to see where this gets picked up, whether it's the main book or in any of the tie-ins. I am going to give this issue a 7 out of 10.